Hi nerds! If you look at my reviews list, then you will note that they are all online games for now. And since I like to do everything the game has to offer before I make a review on them, what often happens is that I play through multiple online games, some that I have played quite a bit, but that I feel like I haven't done everything it has to offer, resulting in me playing it, but not actually making any videos on it yet, or games that I feel like I saw everything it has to offer for now, but that the devs promise some big changes in the near future, resulting in me keeping it on hold until I see said big changes. All the while waiting on Bethesda to bring new stuff to collect in Fallout 76, so that I can make videos on that. That's a lot of waiting, and oftentimes I end up with no content to go ahead with. Until now, I have been trying to find an MMO to get to the end game, so that I can just focus on collection stuff as the new updates come out like I do in Fallout 76, but that has been difficult. Either the game that I'm playing isn't really the type of collecting stuff that I can show, or they have completely tanked, making those hundreds of hours I put into the game kind of feel like they went to waste. Though I guess we'll have to see on the 15th to see if I can get back into it, not that I'm speaking about any specific games in particular. It wasn't until a friend of mine asked me why I didn't make collection videos for offline games, since I would just need to spend a specific amount of time to beat through it and then boom, I would have content. But of course, being the broke nerd that I am, I was reluctant to spend over 60 bucks on a new game that I would be over with in 20 to 40 hours to make one review video and perhaps one or two collection videos. But I realized, being a massive collector and gamer that I am, I've amassed a large number of games throughout my life. And of course, more than half of those don't have anything to collect, but RPGs usually tend to have stuff to collect. Not only so, but my handle before the nerd bucket used to be RPG Beater, and have beaten over 120 RPGs back in my days. So I figured, why not review an older game that I loved back in the days to see if they still hold up today. And while I beat through it, of course, I can collect everything I deem worthy of collecting, so that possibly I can make a separate video on collections in that game as well. Even if I don't think there would be many views on collection videos of older games like this. I just want to have that on my channel so that anyone looking for stuff can find everything in one place. So that's what we're going to do. As for the very first review of Does It Still Hold Up, I figured I would go back to one of my personal favorites, to see if in fact it still holds up after all these years. So without further ado, let's talk about Fable. Now of course, to specify, I will be reviewing Fable Anniversary, which is a 2014 remastered version of Fable The Lost Chapters, which is a 2005 extended edition of sorts of the original Fable, which is a 2004 game. So at the very least it is a 10-year-old game, and at the very most it is a 20-year-old game. The one I played the most is of course The Lost Chapters, but aside from the retouched graphics, not much has changed in the Anniversary at all, including all the glitches we could use in our favor, and including annoying bugs that they just decided not to fix in these 20 years. So you know, in some ways it could be seen as positive, since you would be having an extremely authentic Fable experience even 20 years later, but on the other hand, was it a lazy remaster? Maybe. And that's a sentiment that persists when we look at the 2 DLCs they have added to the Anniversary, but more on that later. Let's first talk about the graphics that I mentioned just now. And just looking at the world, the details on the weapons and armors, I'd say Anniversary still holds up in the looks department. It is not terrible despite it being 10 years old, as having this stylized style is definitely giving this game a sort of timeless feel to it. But then, when you look at the characters and their skins, you might think, wow, that's kind of weird. Let me tell you, it's a huge improvement from the Lost Chapters and the original one. I didn't used to think so, but I guess games back then, especially on consoles, they had this fuzzy effect to them, so it didn't look as bad. But I just booted up the Lost Chapters now to make a comparison, and wow, I'm immediately hit with Uncanny Valley. So taking that into consideration, it is a huge improvement, at least on some characters. Speaking of things that didn't change much at all, let's look at the tutorial. The tutorial is simple and straightforward. The controls can be a little awkward on the keyboard and mouse because the original game was designed for an OG Xbox, so a few quirky things like sprinting being on the right click of the mouse, but nothing too crazy really, you get used to it pretty quickly. But more importantly, right off the bat, they show you that you can do stuff that affect your moral alignment. Doing good deeds get you good points. Doing bad things get you evil points, and different NPCs react to that accordingly. And this plays a big role in the game. It's one of the main reasons this game got so famous back in the day, because as you become more and more evil, your character physical traits would slowly change to become more demonic. And the more good deeds you did, the whiter your hair became, and even a halo appeared around your head when you maxed out your good points. Not only did this have an aesthetic impact, but certain spells could only be maxed out if you were either fully evil or fully good. That said, it's not quite what Peter Molyneux had promised way back when Fable 1 launched, but if we overlook all of the extravagant promises that had been made back then, I think there's still a pretty interesting system that not many games back then tried to tackle. It's also important to note that whatever you do for the very first time, the game will tell you about it. Like when you interact with a silver chest for the first time, or try to talk to a demon door for the first time, or even open your menu for the first time. So I think the game does a good job in telling you all about the different things in the game, but also if you don't try a lot of different stuff, there will be things for which you won't see the tutorial message until much later in the game or at all. The tutorial also does a good job with setting the vibes for the rest of the game. Irreverent and funny for the most part, but can also turn dark real quick and get serious when it wants to. Not only with the vibes, but also setting up the world and story. Our village gets raided, our family is killed, we get saved by a weird looking mage who I could have sworn was a daddy looking black dude in the original and the lost chapter, but who in Anniversary looks more like a crazy white dude that has had his fair share of illicit substances. His eyes look bulging and a ton of wrinkles. Why was that necessary? Maze was fine as hell the way he was before. But anyway, this mage takes us to, well, practically Hogwarts, but for medieval fantasy heroes, where we're taught swordplay, archery, and magic, so that we can, once we graduate, eventually exact revenge on those who took away our family and make some new friends along the way. Or you know, so that we can murder what's left of our family and murder those new friends that we made along the way. You have graduated Hero Hogwarts, the world is your oyster. Go out and do whatever you feel like because there's really no real accountability amongst heroes, I guess. The combat, much like everything else in this game, is fairly simple, which doesn't mean bad. It's pretty fun actually. It's just that it's not too complex or advanced. Just keep hitting the bad guys, really. The main focus of the game revolves around quests, which are either given by an NPC or gotten at the guild through this map in the form of quest cards. People come from all over Albion to write quest cards and leave them here so that heroes that want to help them can take the quest card and do them. It is a much more interesting system if you take into account that Molyneux had promised that other heroes would take quest cards of their own if it took too long and finish those quests, and sometimes even try to finish the quest that you are doing to take the reward for themselves, you know, like a real living world where each hero is going through their own lives with your own aspirations. Of course, none of that happened, so having the guildmaster tell you to come back to the guild to check for quest cards just feels like an extra step to get your quests, especially when the person who wrote the quest card is right there with you, but they tell you that they'll leave the quest card for you at the guild. You can also boast about some of those quests before you start it, and if you do what you boast about, you get more experience points and more renown points. But if you fail, you get less than if you wouldn't have boasted, so it's a gambling system of sorts. Getting renown, you can unlock certain emotes and titles. There's also a lot of other different mechanisms and activities in the game. Seeing that this is an RPG, you can get experience points when you kill foes or allies, green points for the general experience points, then blue, red, and yellow depending on what you use to kill them. Magic, ranged, or melee. With these points, you can learn to upgrade different skills at the Heroes Guild. It is a somewhat simple system, but you are given free range over which skills to pursue first or further. You can make whatever build you'd like, however you like it. Increasing physical skills also makes you bigger and buffer. Increasing agility skills makes you taller, which is a little weird. And increasing magic skills makes you have these blue marks throughout your body, kinda like Maze and Scythe. But it is not as complex as they intended, I think. You see, the longer you are in a fight, the more the combat multiplier goes up. This is how much the experience points you get gets multiplied by. So the longer you're in a fight, the more experience points you get, as opposed to fighting the same amount of foes in separate instances. Which is cool and motivates one to string different spells and skills together to keep the fighting going. And sometimes if you run out of enemies, well then, there are other NPCs around and you can attack them too, to keep the multiplier going up. But as you keep playing, you do get enough experience points to the point where you do get to max out most everything towards the end of the game, so that at the end, most players always end up looking like a roided out giant with magic veins all over. I mean, it's great fun to play like that, but you know, not really that great of a variety there towards the end game. Some of the activities you can do is of course fishing, digging in different places, including but not only pertaining to graves, taking part of a Bearfist Theater Club at night in each town, Kicking chickens isn't really an activity, but it is something that you can do, like murdering guards or citizens and then buying their houses when they're gone so that you can upgrade the house and then flip it for chump change because you can. Those really aren't activities, but you know, you can do them still. But you can't participate in different contest stuff, one of which is chicken kicking. But yeah, you can buy houses and rent them out, and then the people who rent them just throw the rent money on the ground, and you have to come get them. Thankfully, no one steals the money, but you do have to come get it every time. You can steal stuff, break down the doors to break in, assault your neighborly citizens, etc, etc, and if you get caught, you just have to pay some fee and be on your merry way. Truly a utopia. You can also donate to the Temple of Avos, this world's iteration of a good deity, to gain holy points and possibly rejuvenation. Or you know, sacrifice strangers or loved ones to the Chapel of Scorn, this universe's iteration of an evil deity, for evil points and personal pleasure, I guess. Or, if you're more of a person of the world, you can visit a certain establishment to fulfill your desires of the flesh, and go to taverns and drink and gamble. Sometimes you'll even meet other heroes around different towns, taking a break from questing. You can definitely tell that the devs were trying to make this world seem like it was a living world, and yet, a few things work, but it's just not enough. For the most part, they have a lot of mechanisms that other RPGs have, or had back then, like arena fights, escort missions, puzzles of some kind, and so on. But there are a few things that are in the game, but it feels like they added just to have. Like stealth. There is really only one single mission that requires stealth, and they force it on you because if you do get detected, you have to start over. But aside from that mission, you don't actually ever need stealth again, even when doing illegal stuff. Despite there being an armor set that specifically improves stealth. Maybe it was one of those things that they had planned to be much more in the game, but ended up cutting a lot out due to how much they had overpromised with this game. The soundtrack is actually superb in this game, and it is one of the things that I remember the most from this game. It sets the mood immediately for the situation or ambiance. There are also some things that simply aren't in the game at all, like jumping for one, which is very strange to think about right now in 2024, but really, not many RPGs back then in 2004 had jumping, so you know, it's understandable I guess. There's also no crafting. They do add a little weird minigame crafting for Fable 2, but here, none of that. And again, right now in 2024, crafting in RPGs might feel like a staple, but I think I'd rather not have one than have a half-assed crafting system. In terms of items, there's armor/clothing, weapons both melee and ranged, consumables which range from healing/mana/resurrection items, food that gives good or evil alignment points, food that gives bit of magic, agility or melee points, elixirs that give a lot of magic, agility and melee points, and food that fast forwards time to daytime or nighttime. There are also gifts that you can give the other NPCs, trophies that you can get from finishing quests and you can show them off to NPCs to gain some renown points, and key items like fishing rod, shovel, augmentations for your weapons, and silver keys. Speaking of silver keys, there are several silver chests around Albion, and unlike normal chests which can just be opened anytime, each silver chest has a specific number on them. That number is how many silver keys you will need to open each of these chests. Their contents vary from elixirs, augmentation, clothes and armor, and legendary weapons. And much like silver keys, there are also demon doors around Albion, and each of them will have a specific requirement for them to open. Fulfill their requirements and you will get something specific out of each of them, and their contents are for the most part similar to silver chests. Needless to say, there are at least a few things that we could collect in this game, which is important to someone like me, who loves to collect things. In fact, like I mentioned before, I will be posting a few collection videos for this game in the future, so stay tuned if that's something you are interested in. Aside from that, the Anniversary does have 2 DLCs like I mentioned. Do the DLCs give any story content? Nope, just a bunch of items. Oh, do we get those items from new missions or puzzles and challenges? Nope, you just buy them from several NPCs. Oh, do we get new NPCs? Nope, just the usual vendors in town got some added items in their inventory now. Well, are the new items awesome looking at least? Well, kinda. The issue here is that most of these items were assets that were already in-game or previously made as mods. Half of these are just recolors and a lot of them are just outfits of the other heroes just resized to fit the hero. The only real new stuff are stuff like this, the Wasp outfit, which looks absolutely ridiculous. But for the most part, it is pretty disappointing to say the least. Like these guard outfits, not only are they just recolors of the guard outfit that we got in game already, but they put the wrong names. Bowerstone Guard, Not whole guard? Nah, these different colors were supposed to be their ranks or regiment, I think. But even then, they messed up these colors. If you go find the blue guards and check, you can see that the colors are off. Not the same thing. But if you go to the red guards, it's even worse. What is this, orange? It's like I'm a wannabe guard or something. And the worst one is this one. They're just recolors of the other outfit, so they don't even have the furs that these real guards have. It just screams lazy, and it's just so evident that it's a low effort DLC, which is super sad because this is such a loved game. Even the anniversary itself was a little disappointing that they didn't include any new content or fix any of the existing bugs that have been around since 2004. And yeah, remaster doesn't mean remake, but still, since Fable 2 never made it to the PC, and 3 having been taken out of all digital stores on PC, it would have been nice if Anniversary got some more love than just a bare minimum. Although I guess the hero outfits from the DLCs added in there does let us have hilarious moments like these. But despite my disappointment, it doesn't mean I don't like the game. The characters, the setting, the humor, god the humor, and the story itself are all very enjoyable and charming. Much to the contrary, this was my absolute favorite game back in 2006 and up to around 2012. Every year around my birthday I would install The Lost Chapter to beat through it all over again. I think the biggest thing about it, for me, and most likely a lot of people too, who liked Fable, was the perfect amount of simplicity. Like, it still had the basic RPG elements to give it a structure, and yeah, it had its own main story which wasn't bad either, but when it came to your character in specific, his thoughts and motivations, it was just left blank for you to fill out, or not, as you played. It just let you run wild with your own little story. Like, if on your village as a child, you did bad things in the tutorial, perhaps you were a naughty kid, and then the raid happened, and that could be what turned your character around to be a good person like your father wanted you to be. Alternatively, maybe the raid is what made you bitter towards everyone in the world, and what made me, and by me I mean you, murder everyone including all the main characters in this game. And that sort of freedom in the narrative is what got me hooked to this game and made me beat it over and over again. Not because there's any randomization or replay value, because there's really not that much difference from one play to another, but because the story that I could come up with for my character in my head was different every time, even just slightly, I did enjoy that quite a bit. But despite how popular it was, and it really was popular, even got a bunch of awards, it did also get a lot of hate. I do feel like that most of the hate this game got were specifically because of Molinix's overpromising things that never came to be. And this repeats for both Fable 2 and Fable 3. The biggest thing that everyone remembers is probably that if you plant an acorn, you would see it grow into a tree throughout the game. That didn't happen. The idea was nice. They wanted to make this game feel like a living world where all of the NPCs aged and new children would appear when the previous ones grew up to be adults and so on. That didn't happen either. We can definitely see our own characters start to age, becoming old and get wrinkles and all, but none of the other NPCs change. And with Anniversary, I guess it was Lionhead's last chance to show that they didn't forget how great Fable was, even if they did fumble with Fable 3. But it makes sense that people were so mad that it didn't add any real content to it, if this was serving as sort of an apology for Fable 3. But in retrospect, it is very sad that this was the very last decent/good thing Lionhead gave us in regards to Fable. But, like I said, if you play this game for what it is, without thinking too much about what it should have been, even if you don't think this is a great game like we thought back then, I think you will find a charming little RPG that anyone can find enjoyable, or at the very least amusing. And with that, I do believe Fable Anniversary still holds up to this day. And that's it, guys. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for your time and attention. I would like to take this time to thank my nerdy members of this channel, without whom it would be much harder for me to keep these videos up. If you would like to be a member, click on the join button below to see the different tiers of memberships here. Otherwise, let me know other games that you would like to see me review, and or stuff you would like to see me collect in any game whatsoever, as long as I think they're cool. Anyway, leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to see more videos like this, and of course, always nerd on.